I first developed a passion for flying foxes years ago. I think it was probably one of the first times I ever saw a fly out. Where I live in the summertime, we have the privilege of seeing the bats flying out at dusk, and I think that's just where it all started. So one of my first interactions with grey-headed flying fox carers was shortly after Black Summer. Like many Australians, I was devastated at the loss of native wildlife, and I knew that the grey-headed flying foxes were really going to cop it because they relied on flowering eucalypts, and our forests were decimated. Was there going to be a starvation event? How on earth were they going to move around without dropping out of the sky from starvation? So I got in touch with a local carer to just do some filming with them, because they were integral in saving what was left of the flying foxes and those that had been orphaned or were just needing care. And that started the introduction into the whole network of amazing and wonderful and special carers that we have. This was a labour of love for me. I dedicated my summer to this. It meant so much to me to get this story out. So the generosity of the wildlife carers to allow me into their home for often hours at a time, and on several occasions for them to give their time to me, was extremely generous of them. The way that a flying fox learns to trust a human who's trying to care for it, and they learn that very quickly, is just an amazing thing to me, that, you know, an animal, a wild animal, can connect with a human on such a deep, trusting, caring level. The thing about flying foxes in particular, with their big dark eyes that immediately catch you as you're underneath a colony, is the eye contact they make with you. They're keeping an eye on you, they're watching your movements. In the meantime, they're sort of chatting with each other or squabbling or making those noises that they do. So they're keeping their own vocalizations with each other. And I learnt, you know, talking to scientists and people immersed in the bat world, that, you know, they have up to 40 vocalizations. Speaking to a carer for the first time, and she told me about the story about the eye contact that she'd had with a flying fox for the first one that she ever took in. That just really connected with me on many levels, and the emotion and that she experienced, and the benefit really of being able to connect with this creature and help it and rehabilitate it and put it back into the wild, was just something that I personally am so grateful for. I wanted to work within what was a good time for them, because many of them, you know, who had up to 60, 80 pups, you know, were just working round the clock on no sleep. It was often very much a case of shadowing their work. Lynn, our in-sale with Moon Shadow Rehabilitation and Rescue, had 38 little pups over the peak season. So she had to bottle feed every single one of those pups, I think 3 times a day or something like that. So by the time you mix the formula, weigh it per bat, mix up the solution, feed the bats, put them back in their little bat burritos, as they called them, where they're wrapped up in blankets to replicate their mum's cuddles. You know, by her last feed of the day, she'd be done by 2 a.m. And that's not to mention the things she had to do in between, like washing all the bat-pooped cloths, and tending to the juveniles or the adults where there were injuries and they needed bandages changed. So it was just non-stop. We should be thankful for these carers who spend their own money much of the time, give up all their free time just to rehabilitate and release these bats. They provide a huge service to our local environment. They are long-range pollinators. We all know that bees have a pollination service, and we know that, you know, everyone talks about no bees, no food. Well, no bats, no forests. Something that they can teach us that humans find it a bit harder on this level is about coexistence. Bats get a hard time because of noise and smell and misinformation about disease, and say for example with their smells. Their smell is not that they're dirty, they're very clean. They're like cats, they're constantly cleaning themselves, their bubs, all day, just like a cat would. So the smell that you actually get from them is their pheromones when it's mating season, and it's this sort of really fruity, tangy smell, you know, and people sort of get irritated by it because I feel that a lot of us have lost a connection with the natural world. So when it comes to bats, I believe there's two issues here, sort of two-pronged. One is from pop culture. Things like horror movies and scary bats and vampires and Dracula and all that stuff. There's a lot of people that associate, strangely to me, that bats are scary, you know, and they're going to suck my blood and all that stuff. When really all a flying fox wants to do is drink nectar or eat fruit if they can't find the nectar, because they just want to pollinate the forest. But the bigger problem, I think, is the myths and perceptions around disease. The one disease that is of note is lyssavirus, which a grey-headed flying fox can carry. Only statistically about 1% of grey-headed flying foxes actually will have lyssavirus, and that's because it will kill them eventually. So it's a very low percentage of the bat population that will actually have it. And more importantly, the only way for a human to be impacted by that is to be bitten or maybe scratched. And the only way that could happen is if you climb into a roost and somehow get your hands on a bat. And obviously it's going to defend or protect itself. Or if perhaps someone tries to handle a bat that's been stuck in a fruit tree or barbed wire. And that's why all the carers and all the information on social media or online says, just don't touch and call a registered wildlife carer or rescuer. So one thing that people can do in Australia to help the flying foxes is remove their fruit tree netting. You could consider doing this even just for this season or this year, because the flying foxes have experienced a starvation event, the source of which is unclear and unconfirmed by scientific data. So when they can't find pollen or the eucalypts haven't flowered, they venture into backyards to chomp on some fruit as their sort of supplementary source of food. So general public, just anyone in Australia could just remove their fruit tree nets and share their fruit. Another thing they could do is plant native eucalypts in their backyards or be part of a tree planting event. So in the decades to come, there will be more habitat and a food source for the flying foxes. I cannot imagine an Australian night sky along the southeast coast or northern Australia without seeing a bat fly out. It just breaks my heart to think in 100 years that might not be possible. They're a bit of, you know, they're the misunderstood and unfairly vilified species, and for some reason that amplifies my desire to sort of change people's minds about them and understand just how precious they are as a keystone species to pollinating our forests. So I just want to see Australia shift their attitude towards flying foxes, and we've only got about 500,000 left, and it would be a real shame to lose them. So if we could just learn to coexist with them, understand their importance, and maybe get to know them, they can teach us the perfect lesson to coexist with nature once again, because frankly we need them more than they need us.